All right, so let's go ahead and start building the components for the city generator. In this part, we're going to lay down 3 geometry nodes in which we're going to be building separate networks. Let's go ahead and put them down, geometry. Let's copy that and give them different names. So for Geo3, let's just change that to building clusters, which is where we're going to be building the clusters in. Let's dive inside, remove the file node just to get rid of it. Let's call the Geo2 node buildings. And let's remove that file node 2. And the first one we can call city blocks. This will be delivered by, for example, your layout department, or maybe you've made it yourself, but let's assume it's been delivered externally, and we're going to have to modify the geometry inside there to be able to work with it. Let's dive inside. Well, actually, we're going to need a file node. So let's just put that back. Now, with this course, you should have a folder of materials to use. In that should be included a city map. Let's go ahead and find that. So for me, it's called cityplan.bgo.sc. It should be either the same or very similar for you. Let's import that. And if we zoom out on that, we can see that we have something that looks like a city plan with the roads cut out. This is basically the city we're going to be filling up with buildings. But let's go ahead and assemble these pieces. So if we do tab assemble, we can actually turn them all into single pieces, and the assemble node has a few other interesting functionalities. So what we want is what I want, and what you should want, I suppose, is we want a piece attribute, and we can call that block underscore something. And now you can have a name attribute, which will be starting with block, and then it numbers them. So if we go into the spreadsheet, what we should have is a primitive attribute with piece 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And we can see that we have 69 pieces, and what this is basically just the single pieces, the ones that are connected to themselves. Now, when we go ahead, we want to pack them into single points so that we can easily work with them. But first, we will want to scale up these city blocks. So go ahead and drop down a transform node. And the reason for that is that the buildings that we get from modeling are way bigger than the city layout. So each building will comfortably fit on the actual grid, whereas we want them to fit multiple times into one city block. So if we scale this up by 15 times, we should have something that can hold up to say 8, 9, or maybe 10 buildings, depending on the block size. Well, the other option would be to reduce the size of the buildings, but I'd rather not mess with what comes in from a department I have no control over, so modeling can do what they want, and I'll just adjust my workflow to theirs. That's easier since we're one step down the line, right? I mean, first there's modeling, layout, etc., and then we get effects. So let's just keep it like this, 15 times bigger, and we should now be able to see that our grid is quite small, but one building is almost as big as the grid, right? So you can sort of guess how many times it would fit into a city block. These city blocks are quite small, and then there's bigger ones right there. So now what we need to do is group together those city blocks that will contain commercial buildings. Select them all one by one. Now, which city blocks you pick to contain the commercial buildings is up to you. I would like them all to be in the middle of the circly road and maybe add a few blocks around. So now that we've got the blocks selected that we want, we can type tab and say group, right? And that's going to create a primitive group containing all these city blocks. It's not entirely what we want. First of all, we want to call it CBD group, just to make it easier. You can give this any name really. And then if we, in Houdini, we can go to group name and say $OS, and that will simply take the name of the node as a group name. So if you middle mouse, it will make it CBD group. There we go. Now this is a primitive group. If I would change it to points, the selection of primitives here, instead of, because what it does is it takes primitive 52, primitive 54, right? Primitive 52 probably contains at least 20 points. So now it just takes 0.52 and 0.54. So it's not that easy, right? So we're going to keep this as primitives to make sure that our selection is correct. So now if we just go up to the edit tab, we can actually go to the convert tab. And in group, we can say $OS. So this is the group we're converting from primitives to points. And now you can see that we've actually got a point group here. The reason I want to change it to a point group is because we're going to be mainly working with point attributes. After we're done with what we want, we're going to convert every single city block into a single point containing all the attributes we want. And as such, I don't want primitive attributes there. We'd have to attribute promote them at some point to a point group. If we get the spreadsheet back up, we can see that we have a piece attribute or name attribute piece 0, piece 1, piece 2. That means that I made a mistake on the assemble node. What we don't want to do is create this piece attribute. We just want to call the output prefix block underscore. And if we do that, we should see that the name of the blocks becomes block 0, etc. So now what we can later do when we actually pack them, we can pack by name so that all the points that belong to one city block get packed together. Let's also visualize that. The usual way to do that would be by using a color node. We could say, make it red, right? So 100, wire it up. And then we can say only the CBD group. Doesn't actually fit on my screen, but it should be all the way at the bottom. So there we go. And now what we have is them colored red, and then the other, where the houses are going to go, we'll call it white. We can do all these with a node chain, but because it's a Python tutorial, we're going to do everything in Python. Hopefully this will also give you an idea of how to create attributes, add attributes, set attributes, etc. You know, it's just what we've done in the previous module, only in a slightly bigger scale. So let's just get rid of this color node and drop down a Python node. And then in the next video, we'll start writing the code.